Okay, so of course we're continuing with the Makahannyaharamitsu, and I think everybody here has is familiar with this. I'm not sure if my computer is showing everyone that's here, but I don't think I need to talk a lot is in the way of introduction, so I'll just go ahead and begin. We're at this point where Dogen Zenji is talking about these instances of prajna paramita. And last time we talked about the Four Noble Truths, and he said that the Four Noble Truths are four instances of prajna paramita. So next he says, also there are six instances of prajna: generosity, pure precepts, calm patience, diligence, quiet meditation, and wisdom. So, of course, here he's talking about the six paramitas. And in Mahayana Buddhism, of course, this is a fundamental, foundational teaching. So these six paramitas are not, mentioned in the Heart Sutra. The Heart Sutra, as we've said many times, is a kind of seems to be a sort of negation of the Buddha's fundamental teachings, although it's actually not. As we say, as we have said many times, it's actually the point is to let go of our idea or our grasping onto what these teachings are of the Buddha, and to actually go back or to truly practice what he intended to teach. And sometimes, the Buddha and Buddhism in general and human beings, we have to sort of take a perspective when we're talking about things in this, realm of communication. So Heart Sutra, it seems, presented the teachings in a sort of negative way, for lack of a better word, not a negative connotation, but a kind of deconstructive way, to deconstruct our ideas and our clinging and show us that, our views are limited, and to open up our life experience and our perception and understanding of Dharma and reality through a kind of deconstruction of everything. And with also, though, human beings can't really survive and go forward with only deconstructing things. So we have to reconstruct things too. But it's important, I think, to understand that when we construct things, we're, constructing them on the basis of empty space. It might be one way of putting it, as this piece, Makahannyaharamitsu, says later in the text here, that we're kind of having something to say on the basis or as an expression of empty space. And we'll talk more about, what this empty space really means a bit later. But so we need to have something positive to say in order to, function as human beings. None of us would be here today if we didn't say there was something like Buddhism or Shoryu or Gyobutsuji or Shakyamuni or any one of you. So here, the actually the Heart Sutra or the Prajna Paramita Sutras, we think of them, as I said, as kind of negating this reality. And yet, when we, of course, remember what the Heart Sutra actually says, towards the end it says, Bodhisattva relies on Prajna Paramita. So it's beginning to give us something to say. or to practice or to manifest. And, as I often say, this relies on Prajnaparamita can also be translated as a bodhisattva arises from Prajnaparamita. So our practice and all of the Buddhas, everything we think of as the Dharma in our practice arises from this practice of Prajnaparamita. So anyway, one way we can look at these six paramitas is a sort of positive way of expressing what we rely on, or what the Buddhas arise from, or what wisdom arises from, or what reality arises from. So, and these paramitas appear very early. We don't really know exactly when they were constructed. There's different versions of them, and even in the early Pali texts, there are something called the 10 paramitas or perfections, and so probably this is a sort of evolution of those 10 paramitas. In fact, some of the qualities here, aspects of practice, are mentioned in those early 10 paramitas. So as a way of review too, of course, this paramita is an important word that we could study quite a bit. It's usually translated as perfection, or the highest wisdom, or the highest way of offering, or the expression of highest offering. But of course, it's often stated that this paramita literally means going to the other shore, being taken to the other shore of nirvana. We're on this shore of suffering, and the traditional teaching is we endeavor to reach this other shore beyond suffering of nirvana. And of course, in Mahayana Buddhism, and it's one of the primary points of the Heart Sutra, is that this practice itself is nirvana, is the expression of nirvana. So the word implies that the expression of these qualities are the expression of nirvana, or crossing the other shore. It's practice itself, and this we often say, of course, in Dogen Zenji's teachings, and in Mahayana Buddhism. But we say practice and enlightenment are one, and this is Dogen Zenji. This is not an innovation of his. Somehow, this we tend to think this, or Zen, the kind of Zen world or larger world of Buddhism often thinks that Dogen Zenji is kind of the innovation. His great innovation was practice and enlightenment are one. And yet we read, we read in the larger Prajnaparamita Sutra, the big one. There are many of them. This one is the larger Prajnaparamita Sutra. And it says, the Buddha says in that text, enlightenment is just is the path, and the path is enlightenment. So this was very, a lot, way before Dogen Zenji said this. So he's not making something up, or it's not an innovation. And even in the Buddha's teaching, of course, we can find this teaching. It's not as explicit as in these, later Mahayana sutras, but they are there. So we usually think of these paramitas as, the kind of ideal, the bodhisattva, or the ideal of Buddhism, the ideal of a Mahayana practitioner, because the Mahayana tends to, emphasize these six paramitas as opposed to, in the earlier traditions, the Eightfold Path was emphasized. some of that might have to do with the fact that, well, later the Mahayana tradition there's a strong element of involving, lay people in those eightfold, that eightfold path, of course, has to do with every aspect of one's life too. But anyway, anything I kind of say of why this emphasis changed would be sort of speculation. So I'm not really sure, but we tend to emphasize these sort of aspects of what it means to be an awakened being. But the name itself of paramita implies that the expression of doing these things or expressing these things is itself, awakening. So, so Dogen Zenji, is presenting that teaching. I think, he's saying, actually, the Prajnaparamita Sutras say that, but he's, emphasizing that because it's not actually stated. This is my guess because it's not actually stated, in the Heart Sutra. So let's just take a brief look at these 6 paramitas, and it'll be a very brief sketch, about these very kind of deep practices. I think, the main understanding for me, and my teacher taught this, was that there's kind of a couple, maybe 2 pillars, or the main foundation of these 6 paramitas is wisdom. So, if we don't practice these practices with wisdom, we can be totally off. We can be really expressing something very different than the intention that was, embedded in these 6 practices. So I'll try to sort of just mention what that means to me, or what I think that means for us in our practice as we go through them. So, but, in another way, the first paramita is also, I think, a foundation for these, all 6. So the first paramita is dana paramita, or offering, giving, So basically, one way that I like to express the teaching of dana is from the verse that we chant in Oryoki. If many of us here, or some of us here, have done formal Oryoki meals where we open our bowls and we chant verses according to what we might be doing at a certain point. So there's a part of it, I think it's let's see, which part is it? And maybe we all realize, okay, it's at the very, I can't remember where it is though. Anyway, is it the opening verse, like the meal, the bowl opening? But anyway, it's something like, may we all realize the emptiness of the 3 wheels: giver, receiver, and gift. So it's a fundamental teaching of all of Buddhism, I think, and Mahayana Buddhism. So giving is an expression of Avalokiteshvara, for the whole body, as Dogen Zenji mentioned early in this piece. So we can talk about emptiness or interconnection as the teachings of Nagarjuna or the 2 truths, or we can speak of them as Avalokiteshvara. Think of them as the emptiness of the 3 wheels. So Avalokiteshvara, reaching behind his or her head in the dark. It's of course, the teaching that we give as a function of this total reality of interconnection, rather than expression our individual perspective. Our individual perspective is included, but if we say, I'm giving this to these people, or I'm giving a Dharma talk to you, it's kind of a strange thing to say, I have something, that you don't have, and I'm giving it to you. It's kind of a big misperception. If I give this talk in that way, and I'm very likely to have a sort of defiled motivation. The motivation might be, what can I get out of giving you this talk? Or and that might be either, how can I look good, or how can I enjoy doing it, or how can I somehow um, benefit from benefiting you, so to speak. So, it's a kind of a transactional thing where I give you something and you give me something back. And then we're all it's okay as long as the kind of the transactions turn out the way that people think that they should. Or we give, money to a certain organization that's going to help this group of people, and we do that in order to feel good. We do it, which is, it's okay. It makes us feel good. But if the primary function of what we do is just our own response rather than, a function of this total reality, we can really get hung up, and all kinds of things can go astray in our giving. So we might, we might only give what we want people to have rather than seeing what they actually need. We might give in order to manipulate. I don't want to name any traditions or whatever, but we've seen in the history that a lot of destructive things have been done in the name of offering civilization, knowledge, or whatever, religion to other people. People were seen as needing what I have because I know what I have is better than what they have. And so it ends up destroying someone else's culture and trying to replace it with one that you know and think is the real beneficial culture. So we can see at the extremes how, unless giving is done with deep practice, it can be actually destructive. So I just want to read this poem by Ryokan that is such a good, I think, example of giving Dana Paramita. And this is on our website. Probably all of you have heard this poem, but he says Ryokan was a Zen monk who lived in, I think it was the 17th century. I can't remember now exactly. My mind is not functioning so well, worse than usual. So anyway, Ryokan says, and this is a poem, with no mind, the flower invites a butterfly. With no mind, the butterfly visits the flower. When the flower opens, the butterfly comes. When the butterfly comes, the flower opens. I am the same. I do not know the people. And he's talking about, I think this is called Takuhatsu, this poem. It's called Takuhatsu, which is a traditional begging round, in Japanese Buddhism. That's the Japanese word. So he's talking about the people who make offerings to him. I do not know the people, and the people do not know me. So when a monk does takuhatsu in Japan, they have a bamboo hat that goes over the face, and you can't see the person really. You can't identify them. And that's the point. If you're giving in order to support an individual rather than the Dharma, that's kind of a defiled practice. It should be what we endeavor to have it be is the way that a butterfly and a flower interact. This isn't something based on human desire. So he says, I do not know the people, and the people do not know me. Without knowing, we follow the heavenly emperor's law. So without knowing, without this kind of limited viewpoint that I know what's best to do for you, and I give you this because I know what's best for you, is one of the kind of defiled ways that we can give. So, Ryokan is an interesting person, and you might have studied him, but he had a deep Zen training. He did, very rigorous practice as when he was younger, but when later in his life, he ended up basically just living on his own, doing begging rounds by himself, living in a hermitage, and often he would go on his begging rounds, and he would get distracted because he loved to play with children. He would forget all about his begging and play with the children all day. And he wrote, beautiful poetry, and he did like this beautiful calligraphy. So was really revered as a great artist and spiritual teacher. Although he didn't have a traditional life as a Zen monk by any means. Very much out of the box, so to speak, as far as the manifestation of what it means to be a Zen monk. So anyway, I'll go on because we have a few more to get through. So the next paramita is Shila or Sila Paramita, and this is morality is one way that we could express it. So I think this basically refers to precepts. So I imagine that this one was put in here to include the Bodhisattva precepts to include those. So in the Bodhisattva precepts, I think these paramitas are included. There's references to them, and so as I say, this is just an expression, a sort of positive expression. But the Bodhisattva precepts are kind of prohibitions. They're a more negative expression, for lack of a better word. But when we study those precepts, we see that is kind of a very surface way of talking about them, because within those prohibitions are the same teachings, the same aspirations that are contained in these 6 paramitas. But as I said, we need to just express the Dharma from different perspectives because we're limited, human beings, and our language is very limited. So I think the main thing I would like to talk about, or the point that I'd like to make about this, about keeping precepts, is that precepts are a way to encounter the self. Precepts are not a way to judge the world or to judge something outside of the self. So all of these paramitas and, Prajna Paramita teaching is about studying and manifesting the self that is one, goes beyond one and two, all beings. So again, if we take this morality, the Buddhist morality of not killing, not stealing, so forth, we take those precepts and use them to judge someone else, we're going outside of the self. We're creating this subject-object relationship that is kind of the source of all of the problems that this medicine of Prajnaparamita are addressing. So that is the fundamental point, I think, to in mind when we study and practice with precepts. So, just as I say, this is a very brief sketch of each one of them. And Kashanti Paramita is the third one, patience. So, usually we think of this as maybe being, patient with other people and in sort of enduring some kind of difficulty that we're having with someone else, or some kind of unwholesome behavior that we see in others, or some difficulty that we encounter. We have patience. We don't just respond with our first response, our preferences. In Zazen, we don't move, even though we want to. The first kind of inclination is to move. When our knees start hurting a little bit, it's just to move. So, in a way, this precept has to do with that, where we study and sit with our difficulties long enough to not just follow our habit patterns and move towards the first thing that we would normally do. We understand that to study the self means patience, to accept, completely receive all of the conditions that arise, and study those things as empty space, than just reacting. So there's many different levels that we practice with patience. One of them can be practicing our limitations. This is one that comes up a lot from many of us. When we deeply settle down and start practicing with these different aspects of the Dharma, we come to see how limited we are, how much we fall short of having this kind of ability to give with purity, perhaps. So patience, I think, has to do with hanging in there and not giving up, not judging ourselves as in the same way that we don't judge others with the precepts. Another way, of course, we have patience for others, but another way that we might need to have patience for others is to set boundaries. There's no particular way that we can say patience has to be performed. So this has to do with our own particular karmic responses, especially. So, again, we need to practice with wisdom. So if we think we have an idea of what patience or endurance or embracing others means, and that means always letting others have their way, for example, we're outside of the wisdom of Prajnaparamita, and that wisdom says we want to open ourselves to what's actually unfolding before us, rather than an idea of what things are, of what things should be. So, we might think, well, we should always just let someone instead of correcting someone when they're committing some kind of offense towards us, we somehow endure it, and we're patient with them. We don't judge them. And in some cases, that might be true. But actually, if we're sort of allowing an unwholesome activity to take place between ourselves and another person, someone who's kind of perpetrating some unwholesome activity, that's a not wholesome for this person or for that person. To have this kind of karmic response going on is injurious to both of us, as one self. So it's another aspect of patience might be to actually set a boundary. Some of us it's much easier for us to be quiet and not set boundaries. Some of us, it's much easier to set boundaries where as a way of creating separation. But, this emptiness of prajna paramita goes beyond, boundaries and non-boundary. The emptiness sometimes is expressed through boundaries. That's kind of the unfathomable nature of this teaching, is that there's no awakening without some sort of practice, without setting some kind of boundary for the time we do zazen. For example, we can't meet together and do zazen without setting some boundary between ourselves and another person. There may be no genuine exchange possible. There's only unwholesome karmic activity happening, and there's no insight or no clarity happening. So that's one aspect I think that's important to keep in mind when we practice patience. Okay, virya, number 4, is energy. So there's so much we could say about this, but energy is, of course, what enables us to keep going. It's a kind of a manifestation of our enthusiasm and our interconnection and our aspiration to awaken with all beings. Yet we can, if we don't practice with it in that way, with the wisdom of interconnection and impermanence, we can go astray with that even. So resting, for example, is a practice. If we're resting is a part of energy. So if we have a certain idea of what we have to do as a practitioner, and we don't take the time to nurture our energy, we end up going astray. We end up sometimes depending, it's kind of depending on others at times to, carry us along, or we, if you ever have been in a situation where a person sort of grabs the energy, or there's a certain way that, a person can kind of pull the group's energy or try to hold the energy for themselves. I think you might understand what I'm talking about. But so this practice of practicing with energy is important to see it from this broader perspective. Many times after a sesshin, especially when I was younger, but there would be a lot of energy at the end of the sesshin, and there's always this temptation to kind of go all out and, do a lot of activity and do this sort of joyful expression of, oh, this sesshin is finished, and now, we have so much opportunity to do so many things that we couldn't do during sesshin. And all of this energy is sort of dissipated in one moment or a few moments or a day or two, rather than kind of using it as a way to energize our practice and express our practice with others over, a longer period of time. So there's all different kinds of ways that we can think about this kind of energy. Another way is to think of it is, the way that we nurture our own kind of energy and our own enthusiasm, of course, has a huge impact on those we encounter. So the way that we carry ourselves, the way that we present ourselves in a group, has a big effect. So it's another aspect of offering to me. So, when you go into a group, I was doing something the other day, and I was just talking to some of my family, and I was expressing something that was very different from our tradition than the tradition that they were practicing in. And I could see, one of the people were really just sort of shrinking, and, for lack of a better word, it was just sort of the energy was collapsing around them. And it had a huge impact, on the way that I felt like the interaction was going. I don't blame them, because I know it was very difficult for them to kind of take in what I was saying from a different perspective. But there was no criticism, or there was no sort of open opposition, but there's really a tangible effect of the way that we present ourselves and the energy that we bring to a group or to another person, that we can practice with. Okay, so almost through here. So number 5 is dhyana, and of course that is meditation or zazen. And dhyana practice there's a lot of different ways of talking about this. In the tradition, it appears in a lot of different ways. And dhyana was actually translated into, Zen. That's what Zen means. Although Dogen Zenji especially always thought this was a mistranslation, of what Zazen is, because we're not doing the kind of dhyana practice that's recommended in some of the early texts, where we try to go into different stages. So anyway, I don't think that's what this is meant here. So it is referring to our Zazen practice. So it's very important, of course, to study the meaning of our Zazen and what it means to us in our life. When it's time to do Zazen, we just do it, of course. But it's the primary reason that I spent those couple of years talking about, Jiju Zanmai, was because if we don't practice our Zazen with the foundation of prajna or wisdom, we can really do something really different than what's recommended in our tradition. So, that basic teaching of Jiju Zanmai, one of the basic teachings is that our Zazen practice is an offering. But we can do it in such a way where we're creating a separation between ourselves and others, if we're doing it to get enlightened, or if we're doing it for any particular limited reason. So I talk about this often, so I don't think I need to say more about it. And of course, the last paramita is prajna paramita. And as I said, this is the foundation for the rest of our practice. One thing I think we could say about this prajna paramita, and we've said it, we've talked about it so much, but one thing that we could say is that we understand wisdom, the emptiness of emptiness. Prajna paramita really means understanding that this practice and this teaching of emptiness is itself empty. Once we think we know what prajna paramita is, and once we pin it down to a certain practice or a certain perspective or a certain way of viewing things, we've done exactly the same thing that the Heart Sutra is warning us against doing. So that's again, this Dogen Zenji says, how do we, honor this prajna paramita, or how do we protect it? Indra asks Buddha, or is it Subhuti? My mind isn't functioning right very well this morning, but anyway, and the answer is we honor and protect it as empty space. So the way that we, express it in our particular lineage is we keep opening the hand of thought with whatever we encounter. With any of these practices, we practice them with an open mind and an open heart, rather than saying, we know exactly how we need to practice this in this. Each particular moment is asking us, how will you respond? Actually, not giving us a prescribed way of responding, but asking a question of how will we respond. Okay, so I think I will stop there. I don't think I had any notes here that I wanted to make. Let's see, I wanted to make sure to include. So, okay. Well, is there anything anybody would like to say, or any questions or comments this morning? Lacey had something.
One thing that came to my mind, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
When you were talking about boundaries, I guess just one thing that came to my mind that I've just never really thought about, I guess, is that putting up boundaries always feels mean, but really it's coming, to me, it always ends up feeling like I'm just being cold or cruel or something, but really, in a way, it's a making sure that I'm keeping myself from getting cruel or actually mean. So it's really a kindness to set that boundary, to keep that openness or something. So I just appreciated that. What you said about it.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I mean, it's a good point because That's what practice really means, is going beyond our own boundaries and our own um, karmic ways of responding to things. And it's a challenge sometimes, and it really means um, stretching ourselves, sometimes. But that's the way we grow, of course. That's the way we grow. But so how do we have some kind of faith or reason to do that, to go and do something that's so counter to what we instinctively would do? And one of the ways, all of these things are interpenetrated. And one of the ways that I think we see to do that is through, settling down into our life a bit more with Zazen practice as the foundation. We start seeing and accepting more readily how our response patterns don't work and how they create, suffering for ourselves and for others. And, often I said this last week, we're spending a lot of energy not seeing that. But at some point, we settle down and, we can accept and see and try new things. And I think, that's why it can be a really important thing to practice within a community too, and with a teacher. If we have other people that we can discuss and try these kinds of new ways of responding with, that we know and trust are also have the same values, can be a really great treasure. That's why the Sangha, I think, is one of the three treasures, or one of the reasons. So yeah, but it takes a big leap sometimes to say, I'm not going to do this the way that I normally do it. And we need some reason and some support and some way to be able to do that. It's true. So, that's one of the main teachings of emptiness, and one of the main teachings of Zen. Why we're saying things are just not the way that we think that they are, the way that we were raised, and the way that we habitually have been taught, and the way that we've habitually seen things. Reality is just not that way. It's limited. Our own perspective is limited. Yoho had something?
Yes, hopefully my internet connection will allow for me to speak. I've definitely, Lucy, I appreciate you saying that, because it definitely has, I've been on a very long journey with my mom, and kind of being able to understand um, my reaction to kind of her, and the need to set those boundaries so that I could have more energy for myself and to care for myself, and also to care for my family. And because for a couple of years, my parents needed significant help, and I kind of just gave my all. And I didn't have enough for myself, enough for my practice, and for everybody else. And that wasn't healthy, And I see that now, looking back on it. But I see now that that also was thinking that I needed to do everything, that I should do everything. And that was a part of my ego, I think, in thinking, well, they need me to do everything. I didn't actually recognize that I had limitations, and I didn't honor kind of those, what really my limitations. And then so I would continually go beyond that and be frustrated and upset and suffered like a ton. So by the time I realized that, oh yeah, I really do. Like I now understand how to feel when I have maybe reached my limit, and to be able to very clearly say, I think I'm done now. I think I need to, I love you, but I really need to go take care of some things now. So, and like even just the other is a clear example. My mom is, again, I'm not trying to throw judgment out there, but my mom is so much a Trump supporter and Fox News watcher. And so there's times when she'll just go on and start repeating all of these messages that she has listened to, like for like the whole week since the last time I saw her. And I could feel the anxiety just like crazy as she's talking. And I said, Mom, I just, I just can't listen to that. I'm so sorry, but I'm not your person to talk about that with. So I just need to say that clearly. And, this is going to be a very short visit. So let's like really talk about some other things, something that, we can benefit from. And, it was hard to speak up and to just say no. But I realized for most of my life that I have not been actually speaking my truth and allowing for my free and full expression with others. And so while I thought I was being kind and nice by not saying something and noticing what I was needing in the moment, it was actually hurtful because it didn't allow them the chance to grow and to actually know me. Like I have not actually allowed my mom to know who I was because I never fully expressed myself to her. And I have been absolutely amazed about her response and her reaction when I say these things to her. She doesn't get upset. She's like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. So it's like she's totally a different person than I had in my mind of who I thought she was in relationship to me. And it's like our relationship has just started like blossoming now. So anyway, and that was kind of, again, I had these ideas in my head of all of these things of how I should be, but it just was almost like the opposite. So, wow, by fully expressing myself to others, have more respect for me and actually feel like I'm being more authentic and they trust what I'm saying, anyway, it's just so, okay, I'm going to be quiet now, but that just, there's just so much, and I'm going to stop there. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that, Myoho. It's, there's so many good points in there. It's, we have a certain way of doing things, and as you say, we think that it's the most effective way of dealing with the situation, like the most compassionate way, perhaps, to just not say anything in this example, or countless other examples, that I could come up with too. So you kind of don't say, another thing that happens is you don't say what is really on your mind, or you don't set the boundary that's needed to be in a compassionate way, not in a mean way, of course. And we're always want to try to be skillful. This doesn't mean, of course, anything goes. It's all about you. But on the contrary, it's about you getting what they need, getting our needs met. It's about the relationship with everything we encounter as the self, and so the thing that's counterintuitive about that is that we must care for the individual parts in order to care for the larger whole too. But anyway, so you don't say anything, and another scenario is that somewhere down the road things fester so much and that there's a trigger that's much worse or much deeper and more painful for everyone because it hasn't been dealt with, in a constructive way. So, or through just doing nothing. So we don't say something to somebody, and we just kind of disappear, rather than take care of the relationship. It seems easier to just kind of do nothing, then all kinds of harm can come through that. There can be all kinds of projection or pain or misunderstanding, or eventually that might end up in some kind of confrontation too. So it's part of what happens when we start studying cause and effect on the basis of Zazen. I think until we can really ease some kind of little grasp on our habit patterns, it's really difficult to see and accept some patterns of cause and effect that happen in our life. So, yeah, it's a really good observation that somehow we begin to have more clarity when we quit trying to figure things out. When we just try to settle down and receive who we are, receive the self, the clarity can come. And it always needs the help of others too. That's part of the formula, I think. Jordan had something.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you for sharing to myself, Lacey, it's a body, and I'm still I feel like I'm the exact same way in ways. Like I can take on all these things that really should be. It's just a little bit, time out of my day. Not sure it's out of your time in your day and your working weekends, and if you have a schedule, you just start you're not to anybody. And I think like even I've listened many times over the years. I keep doing that, so I appreciate you both sharing.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan. It's pretty amazing. Sometimes we have a story in our head about what will happen if we don't do things a certain way. So, if we have this going, so I have to juggle all of these different things at work in order to be seen as competent, or in order to get the raise, or in order to just be seen as somebody who's engaged in their job. We have, I don't know sometimes where these stories come from. And frankly, sometimes they're probably intentionally put in there by the culture of the workplace, honestly. So that's a whole nother discussion, but back to the basic point, when we actually try a different way of dealing with it, and something happens that's different than the normal outcome, and say that there is some way that we have less status in someone's eyes. Let's say if that actually happens, we understand, can we see the world doesn't come to an end? We have this idea that if not everybody likes us, the world will come to an end. Or we have some idea that if we don't get the promotion, the world will come to an end. Or even if we lose this job, but part of this has to do with the kind of faith in just practice in our life. Life always finds some other way to blossom if we're really rooted in the kind of sincerity or the upright stance, the healthy expression of our life and our awakening. So let's see, there was a comment there. I think Austin had a comment. I didn't see it in the moment.
Yeah, it was just like when you said
that sometimes those ideas about, what you need to do, how you should be in a job, and kind of intentionally put there to the workplace. I just, some things that, like, at least for me, there are certain phrases that about kind of looking at a job or talking to like a manager or something like that, just kind of, and one of those is, somebody says something like, "Oh, like a family here," that to me, at least in my head, kind of goes, so does that mean, there's going to be no boundary between my personal life and, and that's kind of just one of those things I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the family, of course, the family environment is just where the rubber really hits the road, and all of these kinds of teachings is where all of the kind of karmic interconnection, the karmic entanglement is at its deepest. So, we could talk a lot about that, family dynamics, and trying to somehow deal with the system as part of the system. So it's another way of understanding. This is all about relationships. It's not some kind of thing that we can, change by ourselves. It's not some kind of way that we can become a savior or become something outside of the system. We really have to take into consideration the whole of the dynamic, and frankly, that's why it can be hard at work, and why when we have a sort of family of practitioners in this way, there's some, for lack of a better word, there's some opportunity to have a refuge where we can hold each other's karmic responses with knowing that everyone has the same kind of value, baseline value. So, yeah, very good points. Okay, well, is there anything else we want to say today before signing off? I think I had a few things to say about next week, but is there anything else we wanted to say about this topic? All right, let's see. I was just trying to get my screen cleared here. Okay, well, we'll end there, but I'm going to say next week. Let's see, next week it is. I'm giving a talk on Sunday at Atlanta Zen Center. So I'm not sure. Frankly, I probably will have to have just sort of a lighter presentation on Saturday. I'm not sure how the week is going to go with preparing both of those talks. So we might ask everyone to have see if there's some kind of topic that you wanted to reflect on again, or some kind of understanding of the text, or some question, so that maybe we'll just make next week a sort of lighter day, a review of what we've gone over, or a chance to delve into aspects that you might be thinking about or reflecting on during the course of the week. And then there is the opportunity on Sunday to see another Dharma talk at Atlanta Zen Center, but I'm not even sure what time it is, to tell you the truth. I think it's at 9:00, maybe it's 10 here, but I'm sorry. But I'll be talking about the fifth precepts about not indulging in intoxicants. Okay, well, thank you, everybody, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. I hope to see you again soon. May this merit extend universally to all, so that we, together with all beings, realize the Buddha way. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it.